I had not seen my son in nearly 3 years, not because I didn't want to, not because I didn't try, but because when a child decides you no longer belong in their life, they don't have to say it out loud. They just slowly disappear. Phone calls become shorter, messages go unanswered, visits are postponed until they never happen. Still, I kept hoping. Every mother does. So when his message appeared on my phone that afternoon, I stared at it for almost a minute before opening it. "Come over for dinner tonight." That was all it said. No mom, no smiley face, no warmth, just 5 words, but for me they felt like a miracle. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone with both hands, afraid that if I blinked, the message might vanish. My heart beat faster, like it used to when he was a little boy running toward me after school. He wanted to see me. After all this time, he wanted me to come. I replied right away, "I'll be there." I didn't ask why. I didn't ask what had changed. I was too afraid that if I did, he might change his mind. I stood up and looked around my small apartment. The silence felt louder than usual. The walls were bare, the furniture old. But suddenly it didn't matter. I was going to my son's house, to sit at his table, to share a meal like we used to. I opened my closet and stared at my clothes. What does a mother wear when she goes to see the child who forgot her? I chose my best dress. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and neatly pressed. I brushed my hair carefully, smoothing the gray strands. I dabbed a little perfume on my wrists, the same one I used when he was young and would hug me tightly after school. I wanted to smell like home. On the bus ride to his house, I kept replaying memories. Him at 5, holding my hand tightly as we crossed the street. Him at 10, laughing as he helped me bake cookies. Him at 16, slamming his door when he was angry, but coming out later to apologize. Where did that boy go? When the bus stopped in front of his neighborhood, I stepped off slowly. The houses were large and modern. Nothing like the place where I had raised him. His house stood at the corner, tall, bright, perfect. I walked up the driveway, my heart pounding. This was his life now. I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and there he was, my son. He looked older, sharper, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His eyes flicked over me quickly, not warmly, not coldly, either, just distant. "Oh," he said. That was it. Not "Hi, Mom," not "Come in," just "Oh." I forced a smile. "Hello, sweetheart." He stepped aside and I entered his house. It was beautiful, clean, elegant, everything I never could give him growing up. "I'm glad you came," I said softly. He didn't answer. We walked into the dining room. A long table was set. Plates, glasses, food, enough for several people. I looked around. Are we expecting guests? He finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable, you'll see. A knot formed in my stomach, but I ignored it. I was here. That was what mattered. I sat down quietly, folding my hands in my lap. I watched him move around the room, busy with something on his phone. I tried to start a conversation. "How have you been? Are you working a lot?" He shrugged. "Busy." "Are you eating well?" Another shrug. Silence filled the room like thick fog. Still, I kept smiling. Still, I kept hoping. Then the front door opened. Voices filled the house. A woman's laugh. A man's voice. My son straightened instantly. "They're here," he said. I looked up, confused. Footsteps approached. A young woman walked in, elegant, confident. Behind her was an older man, well-dressed, serious. My son rushed to them. "Dad," he said, and "Honey." "Dad," my heart skipped. The man was my ex-husband. The woman was my son's wife. I hadn't been told they were coming. The woman looked at me like I was a stranger. The man barely nodded. My son turned to me then, and that's when his face changed. His eyes hardened. His voice became cold. He said something I never expected to hear from my own child. "Who invited you, old woman?" The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't breathe. For a second, I thought I must have misheard him, but he was staring right at me. "This dinner wasn't for you," he continued. "You shouldn't be here." My hands began to shake. You asked me to come." I whispered. He laughed. That was a mistake. The room felt suddenly very small. The woman beside him crossed her arms, looking annoyed. My ex-husband avoided my eyes. I sat there, humiliated, confused, heartbroken. And then my son said something that would change everything. "This house is not for people like you." The words hung in the air long after my son spoke them. This house is not for people like you. I felt as if the floor beneath me had vanished. My ears rang. My chest tightened so sharply, I thought I might collapse right there in the chair. I looked around the room, hoping someone would say something. Anyone, but no one did. My ex-husband stood stiffly near the table, his eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. The woman who was now my son's wife glanced at me as if I were an inconvenience that had wandered into her perfect evening. And my son, my own child, stood with his arms crossed, waiting for me to disappear. I don't understand. I said quietly, "You invited me." He scoffed. I didn't mean it seriously. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Those words hurt more than the insult. Not because he was angry, but because he didn't care. I came because you're my son. I said, "I thought you wanted to see me." "Well, you thought wrong," he replied flatly. "This dinner is important. You don't fit in here." The woman beside him sighed loudly. "Can we just get on with it?" she said. "We have guests coming later. This is awkward." I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. I tried to make them stop. "Please," I said, forcing myself to speak calmly. "I don't want to cause trouble. I just wanted to have dinner with you." My son rolled his eyes. "Dinner with you," he said. "Do you even know how embarrassing that sounds?" Embarrassing. Like I was something dirty. Something he wanted to hide. My ex-husband finally cleared his throat. Maybe you should go," he said quietly, not looking at me. I stared at him. After all the years. After everything I had sacrificed. He couldn't even meet my eyes. I stood up slowly, my legs weak. The chair scraped against the floor and the sound echoed through the room. "I'll go," I said softly. No one tried to stop me. No one said sorry. I walked toward the door. Every step felt heavier than the last. Just before I reached it, I turned back. "I raised you," I said to my son. "I fed you. I stayed up with you when you were sick. I loved you more than my own life." He didn't respond. I swallowed hard. "I don't know what I did to deserve this." He finally spoke. "You were never good enough," he said. Those words cut deeper than anything else. I opened the door and stepped outside. The evening air was cool against my face. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears. Behind me, the door closed, and that was it. I stood on his doorstep for a moment, unable to move. The house glowed warmly from the inside, full of laughter and voices, a world that no longer had room for me. I walked down the driveway slowly. Each step felt like a goodbye. But what I didn't know yet was that this humiliation was only the beginning, because my son wasn't just rejecting me. He was hiding something, and soon the truth would come out. I walked away from my son's house with no clear direction, just letting my feet carry me forward. The street lights were already on, glowing softly against the darkening sky. Cars passed by, people heading home, families sitting down to dinner. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go. I didn't. Each step I took felt heavier than the last. My chest ached, not from age, but from the weight of what had just happened. "Who invited you, old woman?" The words kept replaying in my head. I had given birth to that voice. I had taught it how to speak. And now it was being used to tear me apart. I reached the bus stop and sat down on the cold metal bench. My hands were still shaking. I wrapped them together, trying to hold myself. I kept thinking about the first day I held him. He was so small, so helpless. His tiny fingers had wrapped around mine, and in that moment, I knew my life was no longer mine alone. Everything I was, everything I would ever be, belonged to him. I had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. I skipped meals so he could eat. I wore old clothes so he could have new ones, and now I wasn't even allowed to sit at his table. The bus arrived with a hiss of air, and I climbed on slowly. I took a seat near the window and watched the city blur past as we moved. My phone buzzed. For a moment my heart leapt. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he realized he had gone too far. I took out my phone. It was a message from an unknown number. "Don't come back." That was all it said. I knew it was him. The words felt like another slap. I put the phone away and stared out the window, my eyes burning. I thought about the last time I had seen him before tonight. He had been leaving for college. He hugged me, promised he would call, promised he would come home. Those promises faded over the years. I told myself he was busy. I told myself he still loved me, but love doesn't sound like that. When I reached my apartment, it was quiet and dark. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The familiar smell of old furniture and simple meals filled the air. This was all I had now. I sat down at my small table, the same table where I had eaten alone for years, and stared at the empty chair across from me. I imagined him sitting there as a child, swinging his legs, talking about his day at school. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to stop the ache. I was exhausted, but sleep didn't come. My mind wouldn't stop replaying his voice. "You are never good enough." I whispered his name into the silence, and in that quiet, I made a decision. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't chase him, but I would find out why he hated me so much. Because no child turns against their mother without a reason. And whatever that reason was, it was waiting to be uncovered. The next morning I woke up with swollen eyes and a heavy heart. For a few moments, I didn't remember why I felt so broken. Then the memories came rushing back. His face, his voice, the way he looked at me like I was nothing. I sat up slowly in bed and stared at the wall. There was no one to ask how I slept. No one to bring me coffee, no one to care. Still, something inside me refused to stay quiet. Why, that single word kept echoing in my mind. Why would my son hate me this much? I made myself a simple breakfast, but barely touched it. My thoughts were louder than my hunger. I took out an old photo album from the drawer. It was worn and faded, just like my memories. I flipped through the pages. There he was as a baby, wrapped in a blanket. There he was on his first birthday, smashing cake on his face. There he was holding my hand on his first day of school. He had smiled at me then. He had loved me. Something had changed him, and I was going to find out what. I decided to call the only person who might tell me the truth. My ex-husband. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since he walked out on us, when our son was still young. But he had been there last night. He had heard everything. I found his number in my old contacts and dialed it. He answered after a long pause. "What do you want?" he said. "I want to know why our son treats me like I don't exist," I replied. There was silence on the line. "He's successful now," my ex-husband finally said. "He's part of a different world. You wouldn't understand." "I understand being hurt," I said. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated. "There are things he believes about you," he said slowly. "Things he was told." "Told by who?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly he said, "By me." My heart dropped. "What did you tell him?" I whispered. He exhaled. "I told him you were the reason our family broke apart. I told him you held me back, that you ruined my life. I felt like I couldn't breathe. You lied. I said, you left us, you chose another woman." "I know," he replied. But he was young. He believed me. Tears filled my eyes. "So he hates me. Because of you." My ex-husband didn't deny it. "He grew up thinking you were weak." He continued, "That you were a burden, that you didn't deserve what you had." I closed my eyes, feeling the truth sink in. My son wasn't just cruel. He was poisoned by lies, but he's an adult now. I said, "He could have asked me, he could have listened." "He didn't want to." My ex-husband replied, "It was easier to blame you." The call ended shortly after that. I sat in silence, my heart heavy but my mind clear. Now I knew, and knowing the truth made the pain sharper. But it also gave me strength, because lies can live forever in silence, but they cannot survive the truth. The phone lay silent in my hand long after the call ended. I stared at it as if it might suddenly explain everything that had gone wrong in my life. So that was it, lies. Years of lies whispered into my son's ears while I was working, cleaning, sacrificing, loving him in the only way I knew how. He had grown up believing I was the villain. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. My head throbbed, but something else was happening inside me too. Anger, not the loud kind, the quiet, steady kind that refuses to die. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the world was going on as if nothing had changed. Cars passed, people laughed, life moved forward, and so would I. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just a rejected mother. I was a woman who had been wronged, and I would not let my story be written by lies. I went back to the bedroom and opened an old box under my bed. Inside were papers I hadn't looked at in years, court documents. Letters, bank statements, photographs, proof of everything I had done for my son, proof of everything his father had abandoned. I found the letter my ex-husband wrote the day he left. "I'm not ready to be a husband or a father," it said. "I need to live my own life." My hands shook as I held it. He had walked away, not me. I began gathering everything. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing. My son deserved to know the truth. Not because I wanted revenge, but because he had been living a lie his entire life, and lies destroy people. I sat down at my table and began writing a letter to my son. I wrote about his childhood, about how much I loved him, about the nights I stayed up when he was sick, about the days I went hungry so he wouldn't, and then I wrote the truth about his father, about the lies, about the letter. When I finished, my hands were aching, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. I didn't know if he would read it. I didn't know if he would believe it. But I was done being silent, because a mother's love doesn't disappear just because her child turns away, and sometimes love has to fight back. I didn't sleep much that night. The letter sat on my small table, staring at me like it was alive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my son's face, cold and distant, and I wondered if anything I had written would reach him. Morning came quietly. I made myself tea and sat beside the letter, turning the cup slowly in my hands. Should I go to his house again? After the way he treated me, every part of me was afraid to see him. But another part of me, the stronger part, refused to be pushed away again. I picked up the envelope. I was just about to leave when a knock sounded on my door. I froze. No one ever came to visit me. I walked slowly to the door and opened it. Standing there was my son's wife. She looked just as polished and confident as she had the night before, but her eyes were different. "Nervous, I need to talk to you," she said. I stepped aside silently and let her in. She looked around my small apartment, taking in the worn furniture, the simple walls, the quiet loneliness. "This is where you live?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "This is my home." She hesitated, then sat down. "I didn't know about you," she said softly. "Not really. My husband never talks about his past." I folded my hands. "What do you want?" She took a deep breath. "I overheard something last night. Your ex-husband and my husband were arguing after you left. He was telling him things about you." My heart skipped. "What things?" I asked. "He said you ruined his life, that you were weak, that you held him back." Tears burned in my eyes. "So he's still lying," I said. She nodded. "But your son didn't look convinced. He looked confused." Hope stirred inside me for the first time. "I think he doesn't know what to believe anymore," she continued. "I think you should tell him the truth." I picked up the envelope from the table. I already wrote it. She stared at it. "Give it to me. I'll make sure he reads it." I hesitated for only a moment before handing it to her. "Thank you," I whispered. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "I'm sorry," she said, "for how he treated you." When the door closed behind her, I sank into my chair. For the first time since that terrible dinner, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. After she left, the apartment felt quieter than ever. The letter was gone now, carried away by someone I barely knew, toward a son who barely remembered me as his mother. All I could do was wait. Waiting is something mothers become very good at. Waiting for a baby to be born, waiting for a child to come home, waiting for a phone call that might never arrive. I sat by the window, watching the street below. Every passing car made my heart jump. Every sound in the hallway made me turn my head. Hours passed, nothing happened. I tried to keep myself busy. I washed dishes that were already clean. I folded clothes that didn't need folding. I made tea and forgot to drink it. My mind kept going back to him. Would he read the letter? Would he believe me? Or would he tear it up and throw it away like he threw me out of his life? As evening came, the sky turned a soft gray. Streetlights flickered on one by one. My phone lay on the table, silent. I was just starting to think that nothing would happen when it rang. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was my son. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Hello," I whispered. "Did you write this?" He asked, his voice tight. "Yes," I said. "I wrote every word." There was a long pause. Is it true? He finally asked. About Dad leaving us, about the letter. Yes, I replied. I kept everything. I never wanted to hurt you with it, but he left, not me. Another silence. I don't know what to think. He said quietly, everything I believed. It's all shaking. That's what the truth does. I said gently. It doesn't always feel good, but it sets you free. His breath was uneven. I was cruel to you. He said. I closed my eyes. Yes. I replied. You were. I didn't know. He whispered. I didn't know. I know. I said softly. We didn't say anything else for a while, just the sound of breathing on both ends of the line. Then he spoke again. I need time, he said, but I think I want to talk to you, really talk to you. Tears streamed down my face. I'll be here, I said, whenever you're ready. The call ended, and for the first time in years, I felt like my son was coming back. The night after my son called me, sleep still did not come easily, but it was different this time. The pain was still there, heavy and familiar, yet something new had begun to grow beneath it. A small, quiet hope, fragile but alive. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building settling, wondering what was going through his mind at that very moment. He had read the letter. He had not torn it up. He had not laughed at it. He had called me. That alone felt like a miracle. I kept replaying his voice in my head. It wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't sharp. It was uncertain, hurt, confused. It sounded like the voice of the little boy he used to be, the one who needed his mother when the world felt too big. Morning came slowly. I got out of bed and made myself breakfast, though I could barely eat. I kept checking my phone, half afraid to miss something, half afraid nothing would happen at all. Around noon, there was another knock on my door. This time, I knew who it was before I even opened it. My son stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I stepped aside. Come in, I said. He walked in slowly, looking around the apartment, the same way his wife had the day before. But his gaze was different. It was filled with memories. This place hasn't changed much. He said quietly, no. I replied, some things stay the same. He sat down at the table, the same table where I had written him the letter. I sat across from him, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid he could hear it. I don't know where to start, he said. You don't have to start anywhere special. I replied, just talk. He rubbed his hands together nervously. Everything I thought I knew feels wrong. Dad told me you made him miserable, that you trapped him, that you ruined his dreams. I swallowed, and now, I asked, and now I read that letter, he said. And I don't know who to believe. I reached for the old box under the table and pulled it out. I opened it slowly, laying the contents in front of him. This is why, I said. I kept everything, not because I wanted to hurt you one day, but because I wanted you to know the truth if you ever asked. He picked up the letter his father had written, reading it in silence. I watched his face change as each word sank in. I'm not ready to be a husband or a father. He looked up at me, his eyes glassy. He left us. He whispered, yes. I said, I begged him to stay for you, but he didn't want to be a father anymore. My son closed his eyes. His shoulders slumped, as if a weight he had carried his whole life was finally being lifted. All these years, he said, I hated you. I thought you were the reason everything went wrong. I leaned forward. I know. He shook his head slowly. I said horrible things to you. I humiliated you. Yes, I said again. I don't know how to fix that. He whispered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since that awful dinner, I didn't see a stranger. I saw my child. You don't fix it all at once, I said. You fix it by being honest, by being here. Tears rolled down his face. I was ashamed of you. He admitted, of where you came from, of how you lived. I thought if I erased you, I could become someone better. I reached across the table and took his hand. He didn't pull away. You were never ashamed of me when you were little. I said softly. You used to hold my hand so tightly. I remember. He said. We sat there in silence, hands connected, both of us crying. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between us, and sometimes that is enough to let the light in. When my son left my apartment that afternoon, he did not hug me, but he didn't walk away in anger either. He paused at the door, turned back once, and looked at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. "I need to think," he said. "I know," I replied. "Take all the time you need." After he left, the silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was full of memories, questions, and something slowly changing between us. That evening, I made myself dinner and actually finished it for the first time in days. I kept replaying his face when he read his father's letter. That moment alone felt like justice in a way nothing else ever could. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was my ex-husband. "What did you do?" he demanded. I told the truth. I replied. "You had no right," he said. "You're turning him against me." "You turned him against me first," I said calmly. There was a long silence. "He's not answering my calls." He finally admitted. "That's what happens when lies fall apart," I said. He hung up without another word. For once, I didn't feel afraid. Days passed. My son didn't call. I didn't push. Healing, I was learning, moves at its own pace. Then one afternoon, he showed up again. This time, his eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. Dad confessed. He said the moment he walked in, he admitted everything. He said he was afraid I would see him for who he really is. I closed my eyes. "So now you know," I said. "Yes," he replied, "and I hate myself for believing him instead of you." "Don't," I said. "You were a child." He looked down. "I wasn't a child when I threw you out of my house." That pain returned like a sharp knife. "No," I said, "you weren't." He took a deep breath. "I want to make it right. I don't know how, but I want to try." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. Over the next weeks, we began something new. We met for coffee. We talked about the past. We argued sometimes. We cried. It wasn't easy, but it was real. One day, he told me something that broke my heart. "I used to lie to myself," he said. "I told myself you didn't care because it was easier than admitting I missed you." I reached for his hand. "I always cared." Slowly, painfully, the years between us began to shrink, but not everyone was happy about it. One evening, my son came to me with worry in his eyes. "My wife is angry," he said. "She thinks you're trying to break our family apart." I sighed. "Love always threatens those who build on lies," I replied. He nodded, but fear was still there, and deep down I knew something was coming, because when old lies are exposed, those who told them rarely go quietly. When my son told me his wife was angry, I felt a familiar ache in my chest, not because I wanted to come between them, but because I knew what it felt like to be painted as the villain. Some people build their lives on stories that make them look good. And when the truth arrives, it feels like an attack. I don't want to cause trouble. I told him quietly, "I know," he replied, "but she thinks you're manipulating me. She thinks you're trying to turn me against Dad too." "Truth is not manipulation," I said. He nodded, but he looked torn. A few days later, everything exploded. I was at home when my phone rang. It was my son's wife. "We need to talk," she said sharply. "Now." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a small cafe near her house. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting stiffly with her arms crossed. "You're poisoning him," she said the moment I sat down. "I'm telling him the truth," I replied calmly. "You're dragging up old wounds." She snapped. "You're making him doubt his own father. He should doubt lies," I said. Her eyes flashed. "You want him back in your life so badly that you don't care what you destroy." I felt my heart sink. I raised him alone. I said quietly, "I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to heal." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're some kind of hero, but all you are is a reminder of everything he's ashamed of." Those words felt too familiar. I stood up slowly. "I won't fight you, but I won't lie either." When I left the cafe, my hands were shaking. That night, my son came to see me. She told me what happened. He said, "She said you attacked her." "I didn't," I replied. "I know," he said. "I was there." My heart skipped. "You were?" "Yes," he said. "I was sitting across the room. I wanted to see for myself." Tears filled my eyes. I heard everything. He continued. "And I realized something. Everyone who lies about you uses the same words. Weak, embarrassing, a burden." He shook his head. "But you're none of those things." I covered my mouth, overwhelmed. "You're the strongest person I know," he said. For the first time in years, he hugged me. It wasn't long. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that hug was worth every tear I had ever cried. But the storm was far from over, because the truth had reached too many ears now. And those who had lied the most were about to fight back. After my son hugged me, neither of us spoke for a long moment. I could feel his heart beating through his jacket, fast and uncertain, just like mine. That small embrace carried years of pain and longing, and even though it lasted only a few seconds, it felt like a lifetime. When he stepped back, his eyes were wet. "I should have done this sooner," he said. I reached up and gently touched his cheek, the same way I used to when he was a boy. "We're here now," I said. "That's what matters." But peace never comes quietly after a storm. The very next day, my phone rang again. This time it was his father. "I want to see you," he said coldly. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do," I replied. "You've already ruined enough." He snapped, "Meet me." I knew saying no would only make things worse. So I agreed. We met in a quiet park not far from where we used to live. The same park where I used to push our son on the swings while his father sat on a bench, distracted, distant, already half gone. He looked older now, tired, but his eyes were still sharp. "You told him everything," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You had no right." He said again, "That was our past." "It was his life," I answered. "And you lied about it." He clenched his jaw. "He was happier before you came back." "He was living a lie," I said. "He chose me." He said angrily, "He believed me, and now you're taking him away." "I'm not taking anything," I replied. "The truth is," he leaned closer, "if you don't stay away from him, I'll make sure you regret it." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You already took everything from me once. You won't do it again." He scoffed. "You're nothing. He'll come back to me." But even as he said it, I could see fear in his eyes, fear of being exposed, fear of losing control. That evening, my son called me. "Dad gave me an ultimatum," he said. My heart tightened. "What did he say?" "He told me to choose." My son replied, "Him or you." Silence fell between us. "What did you say?" I whispered. "I told him I'm done choosing lies," he said. "I told him I choose the truth." Tears streamed down my face. For the first time in his life, my son had chosen me. When my son told me he had chosen the truth, I felt something inside me finally release. For so long I had carried the weight of being misunderstood, blamed, erased. And now, for the first time in decades, someone saw me for who I really was. But truth is never free. It always comes with a cost. The days that followed were not calm. They were heavy, tense, filled with whispered arguments and broken conversations on my son's side. I could hear it in his voice every time he called me. He was standing between two worlds that were pulling him apart. One built on lies, one built on honesty. His wife stopped speaking to him properly. His father sent angry messages. People who had once smiled at him now looked at him with suspicion. All because he refused to keep pretending. One afternoon, he came to my apartment looking exhausted. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," he said, sinking into the chair. "They keep telling me I'm ruining my life." I made him tea and sat beside him. "When you stop living for others, it always feels like that," I said. He stared into his cup. "They say you're manipulating me." I smiled sadly. "That's what people say when they lose control." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." Then he looked up at me, his eyes filled with something deeper than anger or sadness. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked. I took a breath. "Because you were a child, and I didn't want you to grow up hating your father. I wanted you to have peace. I didn't." He said quietly, "No," I replied. "You had lies." He reached for my hand. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said, and for a moment the world outside didn't matter. But peace never lasts long when powerful people feel exposed. That night I received a message that made my blood run cold. "Stay away from him or else." It was from my ex-husband. I showed it to my son the next day. His face darkened. "He's not going to stop," he said. "He's scared." "Yes," I replied, "because lies only survive in the dark." And now the light was everywhere. After the message from his father, something in my son changed. He stopped being afraid. Not because the danger was gone, but because he finally understood who the danger really was. He's been controlling the story my whole life. My son said one evening, pacing my small living room, "Everything I believed about you came from him." "Everything?" "Yes," I replied. "And now he's losing control of it." My son clenched his fists. "He humiliated you, he turned me against you, and when the truth came out, he tried to scare us into silence." He looked at me. "I won't let him do that anymore." I felt fear rise in my chest. "Be careful," I said. "People who are cornered can become cruel." "I know," he replied, "but I'm done running." The next day, he asked me for something I had never expected. "Come with me," he said. "I want to confront him with you there." My heart pounded. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "I need him to say it in front of you, in front of me." We went together to his father's house that evening, the same house that once belonged to our family. The door opened slowly when my son knocked. His father froze when he saw me standing there. "You," he muttered, "her." My son corrected, "My mother." We stepped inside. The room was tense, thick with old ghosts and unspoken words. "I know you lied," my son said. "I know you blamed her for everything." His father scoffed. "She filled your head with nonsense." "No," my son replied, "you did." I took out the letter and placed it on the table. "You wrote this," I said quietly. He stared at it. For a moment he said nothing. Then finally he laughed bitterly. "So what?" he said. "Yes, I left. I didn't want that life. I didn't want either of you." The words hit like a gunshot. My son went pale. "You told me she destroyed your dreams," he whispered. His father shrugged. "It was easier than telling you I just didn't care." Silence filled the room. Everything that had been hidden for decades was suddenly exposed. My son's voice shook. "You let me hate my own mother, to protect yourself." "Yes," his father replied, "and I'd do it again." That was the moment my son stopped loving him. "You're not my father," he said quietly. "You're just the man who walked away." We left without another word, and behind us, a lifetime of lies finally collapsed. The drive back from his father's house was silent. Not an awkward silence, a heavy one. The kind that comes when everything you believed about someone has shattered. My son kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel as if he were afraid to let go. I watched his face, seeing grief and anger moving through him like waves. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "For what?" I asked. "For not seeing you," he replied. "For letting him turn me into someone I don't recognize." I reached over and rested my hand on his arm. "You see me now," I said. "That's what matters." When we arrived at my apartment, he walked me to the door. "I don't want to lose you again," he said. "You won't?" I replied softly, "Not if you keep choosing the truth." He nodded. As he let, I stood there for a long moment, letting the quiet wrap around me. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone in the way that hurts, but healing is not a straight line. A few days later, his wife came to see me again. This time, her confidence was gone. "He told me everything," she said, sitting across from me, "about his father, about the lies." "And?" I asked, "and I was wrong." She said quietly, "I thought you were the problem." I studied her face. I could see guilt there, real and raw. "I didn't want to believe him at first," she continued, "because if you were right, it meant everything we built was based on something broken." I nodded. "That's a hard thing to face." She took a deep breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, but I want to understand. Understanding is where forgiveness begins." I said. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "He loves you." I smiled sadly. "I love him too." And in that small apartment, with two women who had both been misled by the same man, something unexpected happened. We began to rebuild. Life did not suddenly become perfect after everything was revealed. But it became honest, and that changed everything. My son began visiting me regularly. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we just sat in silence, learning how to exist in the same space again. He would bring food, small gifts, things he used to forget I needed. One afternoon, he brought a photo album. "I found this in Dad's storage," he said. "I think it belongs to you." Inside were pictures I hadn't seen in decades. My wedding, my pregnancy, my son as a baby, cradled in my arms. "I didn't know he kept these," I whispered. "He probably kept them to remember what he left." And my son said quietly. We laughed softly. His wife came too, sometimes, slowly, carefully. Our conversations were polite at first, then warmer. Trust takes time, especially when it has been broken. One evening, my son said something that made my breath catch. "I want you to come over for dinner," he said. My heart skipped. Memories of that horrible night rushed back. "I understand if you don't want to," he added quickly, "but I want to make it right, for real." I looked at him, and I saw not the man who had humiliated me, but the child who had been lied to. "I'll come," I said. This time I was not afraid. When my son invited me to dinner again, it felt like stepping toward a ghost. The memory of that first night still lived inside me, the cold words, the humiliation, the way I walked out alone. But this time was different. This time he had chosen me. I arrived at his house just before sunset. The sky was painted with soft orange light, and for a moment everything felt strangely peaceful. He opened the door himself. "Hi, Mom," he said. It was the first time he had called me that in years. I swallowed hard. "Hi." His wife stood behind him. She smiled, nervous but sincere. "Please come in," she said. The table was set again. But this time there was only space for us. No ghosts, no lies. We sat down together. My son served the food himself, careful, almost shy. "I know I can't erase what I did," he said, "but I want to build something better." I looked at him. "That's all anyone can do." We ate slowly, talking about small things, the weather, work, memories. At one point, he laughed about something from his childhood, and it felt like the past and the present were finally meeting. "I missed you," he said suddenly. "I missed you too," I replied, and for the first time in a very long time. We were a family again. The days after that dinner were gentle, not perfect, but gentle. My son began calling me in the mornings just to say hello. Sometimes he would ask how I was feeling. Sometimes he would tell me something small about his day. Those little calls meant more to me than he could ever know. Still, there were moments when the past would suddenly return. A word, a look, a memory. Healing does not erase what happened. It simply teaches you how to live with it. One afternoon, my son asked me something he had been afraid to say. "Do you hate me?" he asked quietly. I turned to him. "No," I replied. "I was hurt, I was broken, but I never stopped loving you." He looked down. "I don't know how you can still love me after what I did." "Because you are my child," I said. "And love doesn't disappear just because it is wounded." Tears filled his eyes. "I want to be better," he whispered. "I know," I replied, and for the first time I truly believed him. One evening, as my son and I were sitting quietly in my apartment, he noticed the old box beneath the table. "Can I see what's inside?" he asked. I nodded. He slowly went through the letters, the photographs, the pieces of a life he had never really known. Then he found something folded at the very bottom. "What's this?" he asked. I hesitated. "A letter I never sent." He opened it and began to read. It was written years ago, back when he first stopped calling, when I was alone and scared and didn't know how to reach him anymore. "I wrote that when I thought I had lost you forever," I said softly. His hands trembled as he held the paper. I was angry then. I continued, "Not at you, at the world, at your father, at myself for not protecting you from those lies." Tears slid down his face. "I didn't know you were hurting like that," he whispered. "I didn't want you to feel guilty." I said, "I only wanted you to be happy." He folded the letter carefully and put it back. "I wish you had sent it," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but then maybe you weren't ready to hear it yet." He looked at me. "I am now." And in that moment, I knew something inside him had finally healed. After my son read the letter I never sent, something changed between us. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady one. He became more gentle with me, more patient, as if he was finally seeing all the years of loneliness and sacrifice that had been hidden behind my simple words. One afternoon, he came to pick me up unexpectedly. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere important." He said. He drove me back to his house, the same house where he once humiliated me. My heart tightened as we walked inside. But this time he led me to the living room where his wife was waiting. "I want you both here," he said, "because I need to say something." We sat down. "I hurt my mother," he said. "I believed lies and I let them turn me into someone cruel, and I won't do that anymore." He looked at me. "I'm sorry, not just for what I said, but for every year I didn't show you love." Tears ran down my face. I forgive you, I whispered. Then he turned to his wife. And I'm sorry to you too. I made you believe something that wasn't true. I should have told you everything. She nodded slowly. I don't want lies in this family anymore, he said. Only truth. And in that moment I realized something. Love is not loud. Love is not perfect. Love is when someone chooses you, after knowing all your scars. Some time passed after that day. Not a lot, but enough for the air between us to soften. Enough for laughter to begin finding its way back into our conversations. Enough for wounds that had been open for decades to finally start closing. One evening, my son called me. Mom, he said, his voice warm, familiar, gentle. Are you free tonight? Yes, I replied. Why, I made dinner, he said, and this time, it's just for you. I sat quietly for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. Not just for you, I'll be there, I said. When I arrived, the house felt different. It no longer felt like a place I didn't belong. It felt welcoming. The door opened and there he was, smiling. Come in, Mom. The table was set for two. No extra plates, no shadows from the past, just us. We sat across from each other, and as he served the food, I realized something so simple and so powerful that it almost made me cry. This was all I had ever wanted. Not wealth, not a perfect life, just a place at my son's table. I used to think strength meant pushing people away. He said as we ate, but now I know it means holding on. I reached across the table and held his hand. You've come a long way, I said. So have you, he replied, and in that quiet room, with two plates and two hearts finally facing each other, I understood something that took a lifetime to learn. A mother's love may be ignored. It may be insulted. It may even be pushed away. But if it is true, it never disappears. It waits, and sometimes it finds its way back home.